As a citizen of the 21st century and digital age, you need to equip yourself with the ability to smell bullshit, or you could find yourself yet another victim of brainwashing. When I say disinformation or propaganda, what do you say? North Korea, Russia, the Soviet Union before it, China, Cuba, or Iran maybe? But what if I told you that the most effective way of spreading ideology or creating sheeple doesn't come from any of those countries? No. Let me introduce you to the confusing, dark world of corporate propaganda.
Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky in Manufacturing Consent argue that in contemporary Western capitalist society, manipulation and indoctrination is way classier. Focusing on the mass news media particularly, Herman and Chomsky explain how bias functions through 5 filters, which help to explain how these sophisticated forms of propaganda work. The 5 filters may dispel any preconceived notion you have of the role of traditional Western media as functioning as a genuine check on power. This is key to understanding how manufacturing consent works, to get you to become complicit in the domestic and foreign policy objectives of the political establishment. They draw the boundaries of political discourse through self-censorship and creating a false sense of choice. They don't just kiss ass, they're polishing turds. Whether that turd is more austerity, a brand new war, you can be sure that our great journalists will spoon feed us at all. The first of the 5 filters is ownership. Media outlets are owned by large corporations with profit-driven motives. These corporations prioritize making a bag over journalistic integrity, leading to a focus on content that attracts audiences and advertisers and aligns with the corporate agenda and is tied to the political aspirations of the ownership. Rupert Murdoch is one of the best to do it, creating a media empire spanning the English-speaking world and spreading an editorial stance mostly known for its right-wing sensationalism and pro-war propaganda. Of course, you also have outlets like the BBC, but the filter still applies. The government plays a role in appointing the BBC Trust and approves a license fee structure. Therefore, the BBC's dependence on government funding and appointment can influence its editorial policies to align with the interests of those in power. This then all helps to sustain a narrative that is acceptable to the ownership, which is in turn highly influenced by lobbyists. Except the BBC gets to pretend that because we pay for it, it serves our interests. Advertising. With us as their captive audiences, media networks sell our attention to advertisers in order to make their fortune. This dependence compromises media outlets who will avoid topics that could step on the toes of advertisers. This filter, like the others, leads to the exclusion of voices which contradict business interests. Alienating advertisers is not an option. Sourcing. Journalists will rely heavily on the media elite, a revolving door of official sources like government agencies, think tanks, and trusted spokespeople. They decide who the viewer should trust, and critical voices can be completely excluded from mainstream media coverage. At the same time, media outlets can also deliberately pick specific voices in an attempt to destroy the reputation of a group or completely exclude others to misrepresent or sabotage a particular point of view. Flack can range from discrediting, smears, character assassinations, imprisonment, and even actual assassinations. The extent to which the establishment deals out flack can vary, but it's always worth watching out for. The common enemy. Historical context plays a role in shaping media content, and the fear of communism has historically been a powerful tool. Many analysts tend to agree that since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the role of the boogeyman has shifted to focus on the fear of Islamism. But anyway, now that you understand the 5 filters, you're well on your way to understanding the practical steps to achieving false consciousness. The ruling classes and the rest of the Western world rely on the masses being in what I would best describe as the state of false consciousness. Friedrich Engels coined the term way before the development of mass media as we know it today. But it's a concept that's actually even more relevant to understanding what it really means to be the victim of propaganda. Ideology is a process accomplished by the so-called thinker consciously. It is true, but with a false consciousness. The real motive forces impelling him remain unknown to him, otherwise it simply would not be an ideological process. The most effective propaganda doesn't just happen through use of media which is immediately clear about its agenda, if you can believe it. It happens when the masses believe they're consuming unbiased and objective information. The thinker is manipulated and influenced beyond his perceptions, but not just through the information he consumes, funneled through the 5 filters. The problem is also a cultural one. false consciousness doesn't just occur because we have a sneaky, devious media. The problem also lies in a wider narrative, the story we're told about our country.
In my view, it's very important that those of us who enjoy freedom don't shy away from taking that message out, and if necessary, standing up and helping those who want to be free outside our borders. And, freedom is such a wonderful gift. Sometimes we complain about our government, our society. Now, you guys complain about Washington, we complain about Westminster and so on. I don't think sometimes in our countries we've any idea what it's like to wake up and not have that basic freedom, to not know whether when you wake up that day you won't get the knock on the door from the secret police or the dictatorship of the government and have your freedom suppressed. We don't know what it's like to live in those types of societies. And what we should do is celebrate the freedom we have, but not hoard it. Want to go out and share its huge liberating sense of possibility.
We hear about the dangers of the cult of personality all the time, as if cult-like devotion to a specific person is worse than a cult-like devotion to a country. Why is that? The exceptionalists are those who make up much of the media class, wholeheartedly embrace the imperial narrative, know the signs. Infected individuals can have a pathological inability to spot double standards or see irony in outrage when it comes to domestic or geopolitics. Ask the exceptionalist, where is this righteous energy for our own leaders in our own countries who have done these exact same things? This is just but one example of exceptionalist thinking. But you can really see exceptionalism taken to its extreme in the most rabid warmongers in politics and the media. You see, they exceed morality. They're exempt from international law. One of the more confusing aspects of the propaganda model to wrap your head around is, we're not authoritarian in the traditional sense, are we? What about the social contract? We're governed by consent. We elect our own leaders. In the world of media and politics, manufacturing consent refers to the subtle and not so subtle ways in which information is curated and presented to shape public opinion. It's not about overt censorship, but rather the strategic framing of stories, the selection of topics, the manipulation of language that can lead people to perceive events in a particular light.
You realize how amazing it is. Like, in America, you have the right to seek the truth and speak the truth, even if it makes people in power uncomfortable, even if it makes your viewers or your readers uncomfortable. You understand how amazing that is?
Through the facade of media impartiality hidden by a complicated corporate structure, the media works by selling you, the citizen, the political narrative. They ensure that you vote for the politicians which approved by the establishment. That's why when I see a politician who's saying things that make me think, okay, yeah, but then their media portrayal is somewhat positive, I almost immediately know something's up. The media, mostly, works insidiously for the interests of the ruling class. Some examples is the United Front liberal and conservative media presented in condemning and playing into Margaret Thatcher's narrative in the infamous miners' strikes of the 80s. Journalists make sure to psych up the public, preferably into a panic, so they will not oppose and ideally even wholeheartedly support the actions of the government, no matter how objectively wrong and hypocritical it may be. This is how they manufacture our consent. Of course, for sure, this doesn't always work. There's no way that people don't notice these things, inconsistencies and lies. The Vietnam War and even the Iraq War was eventually popularly opposed by most Americans. And this was thanks to journalists who cared to report the truth and public figures with the balls to question the narrative. It's crucial to equip ourselves with the tools to navigate this complex media landscape. Here are some practical steps to guard yourself against propaganda. 1. Diversify your sources. Don't rely solely on one news outlet. Consume information from various sources, especially independent media, to get a better understanding of an issue or event. Media literacy education. Understand the tactics used in propaganda, such as framing, selective reporting, and emotional manipulation. Recognizing these strategies can help you decipher the true intentions behind the presented information. Lastly, be open-minded. Don't be pig-headed, and be open to reconsidering your own perspectives based on new information.